Welcome one and all to Bike Racing Without Mercy and a run-in to the world's best sportive, the Fred Whitton in mid-May. Now today's video showcases a recce of the Fred route itself in fine weather, including chaos on Hardknott Pass, plus all of the indoor training that I've been doing to get Lake District ready, including a mini Fred Whitton simulation that I've built on Zwift, literally no expense spared. And of course, all of the performance nutrition tips to help you power through the Fred itself.
Well, welcome one and all atop Newlands Pass on a windy day in the Lake District to Bike Racing Without Mercy. We're in the build up to the Fred Whitton. I'm here with Master of the Lake District, Mr. Lee Baxter. How are you, Lee?
Very well, thank you. Very well.
We're both in the build up. He's looking for a faster time than me, probably sub 6 hours, but we'll see. I will be happy with 1 second sub 7 hours. So today's video is all about the training we're undergoing ahead of the Fred Whitton, starting with a full simulation, an IRL simulation of the Fred itself. We've so far completed Kirkstone, Honister, Newlands, onwards to Whinlatter, but you're also going to see a little bit of the training I've been doing indoors, some simulations of the Fred, 3.5 hour trainings indoors. That's more than enough to simulate the harder climbs and the fast recoveries in between. Plus, Lee, we've got a little trip to Tenerife, have we not?
End of the month, 1 week, yeah.
1 week, yeah. So perfect opportunity for Lee, Paul Livesey and Paul Hambler to drop me repeatedly on the climbs. Anyway, onwards to Whinlatter. You join me atop a virtual Whinlatter. 2 minutes to the summit.
The Wattbike Pro is an excellent training bike. However, the downside, certainly from a YouTube perspective, is the air resistance noise you can hear now.
20 seconds to go. So a lot of the training's been indoors on a Wattbike, where I've created a mini Fred Whitton simulation. It's about 3.5 hours. I'll show you on the screen in a second. But basically I've looked at my previous Fred Whittons and kind of tried to emulate the power. That's a little bit more needed to get over the climbs and the tempo in between, that kind of thing. I'll show you in a second. However, I've been doing these trainings on the Wattbike Pro. The Wattbike Pro is superb. It underreads the aciomas by 5 or 6 watts. Also, the power is harder to deploy. It's something about the air resistance. You need a more even pedal stroke. Not quite sure what the science is. But when you're coming to each of the climbs that's simulated in Zwift, it's super easy to very quickly increase the resistance using the air resistance or the magnetic resistance on the right hand side. Just twizzle them up a little bit, e.g. Just turn it right up and suddenly I've simulated myself a very steep gradient here. So this is the 3rd time I've completed this simulation this year. I've also been doing some racing up in Northampton, the NCRA, and some crit racing in London. Very nasty crash 2 weekends ago up at the NCRA. Final lap, or final half lap, just turning left onto a new road on the downward leg. Front wheel just went from under me. I went down super fast, a lot of road rash and musculature pain, really around the shoulder and upper torso. Haven't been able to move my left arm until quite recently. Certainly not up very much, it hurts kind of now to do that. Unfortunately the head went down, but a specialised helmet, the Evade, it served me well. So just getting back on track now. I'm feeling ready for next weekend where I'm up to the Lake District to see Lee Baxter for a real life simulation of the Fred. Looking forward to that. Fingers crossed the weather's going to be decent.
Well, the level of relief is high because the 3rd mini Fred is under the belt and there was a little bit of progress compared to the previous 2 attempts. 217 watts in 3 hours 21 minutes, taking in 7 of the climbs on a simulated basis. And the Wattbike Pro is definitely helping build the fitness for this event because the ability to change the resistance and simulate the steeper parts of the Fred using the magnetic torque and the air resistance enables me to really have to punch hard with VO2 max on the simulated steeper parts of the climb, and then you can kind of ease it off and go into like a nice threshold or high tempo on the shallower parts. I'll show you the training now. Yes, I should be outdoors, but here we go. And you can see here Kirkstone Pass. About 33 minutes I have for the simulated climb, and I simulate just a few of the little ramps on Kirkstone with some VO2 max efforts at around about 305 to 315 watts there. 6 of them in total. Then we hit Honister, and you can see the first 5 minutes, proper disgusting. Around about 280 odd watts into 310 watts or so, and then just ramping a threshold power for about 7 minutes at the end there. Then we have Newlands, hard, easy, hard, threshold, and then I want my mummy. Windlatter, just aiming for a big threshold climb. They're average about 257 watts for that. Then a little bit of recovery, about 25 minutes of recovery or so before we hit Hardknott. And you can see here on Hardknott, pretty difficult for the first 5 minutes or so. Then you've got the cruising section in the middle, and then the two proper hard 1 minute VO2 to the max kind of efforts with a 1 minute of kind of threshold in between, and then a final ramp of power. And then there's a couple of ramps for Rhinos, the easy way, and then you've got Bleetarn, the easy way, where there's kind of a steepish bit where for about 90 seconds to about 2 minutes, you kind of adjust into your VO2 max. So happy with that. As you can see, 217 watts, 230 normalized. Definitely the fitness is on the up. It's really easy and intuitive to build any kind of training session that you want in Zwift. Simply drag and drop the power block that you want, and then type in the exact time and watts and cadence that you're targeting. Now, whilst I'm using a Wattbike Pro, you could run this on any smart trainer, and you could even use erg mode to police the power and low cadence on the climbs, and then turn it off in between on a simulated flat to ride easy. Simples. Time now to contrast the virtual mini Fred with an IRL recce in the Lake District. This show isn't simply thrown together, you know, transporting us to the jaw-droppingly beautiful Newlands Pass. As for the mini Fred simulation, the steep gradients in real life dictate the need for a good strong threshold for a couple of minutes and then VO2 max for 60 seconds, followed by a little bit of low gradient recovery and then a low VO2 max for 90 seconds into a low zone 4 for about 3 minutes, rounding off with a 90-second VO2 max crescendo with some out the saddle action at the top. Somehow the telemetry did not perfectly align for the rear camera versus the front, and I could not figure out why. So apologies for that. There is a bit of a lag on one versus the other. However, here's the cruising section where we're taking it nice and easy, around about 200, 220 watts. As you can see, Newlands Pass is pretty narrow, so in the Fred itself it can get more than a bit congested, what with all the cyclists, carbon, lycra, titanium, etc. Plus, as you can see here, in the real Fred it isn't a closed road, and sometimes you get cars coming down as well. Can get more than a bit fraught at times. Taking on now the max effort business end of Newlands Pass in all of its majestic glory. Some of my other training has consisted of 2 times 20 minutes at threshold, but with the first interval early on in the session and then the second after 60 to 90 minutes of high zone 2, all in order to get used to working hard with fatigue in the legs. Then every other week I rotate that with 4 times 8 minutes of hard start FTP, comprising the first 90 seconds at VO2 max, settling into 6.5 minutes of threshold, once again to get used to the Lake District rhythm of having to start a climb hard at VO2 max intensity and then settle into a high threshold workload. Hardknott beckons, and we're gonna capture some film as we did on Newlands of Lee's new Ribble with the elite super lightweight wheels. What you got the wheel weight down to with Lee? With the Continentals?
1,300 grams for the wheels themselves out of the bumps.
Nice.
Full build, but it's light.
And Chris Miller and Jesse Core will be happy he's running the 30s. You're liking the 30s, aren't you?
Yeah.
Comfortable and fast. What you got there? You're going with a double Snickers. Frickin' hell.
I could easily eat.
And the Lucozade.
Yeah, tonic.
Onwards. Whether it's the bottom kilometre of Honister or the final km of Newlands or Hardknott's armoury of brutal ramps, there are moments in the Fred where we think we simply can't do it. But we can, provided we stay focused and provided we remain calm and dig deep when the terrain rears up, in order to deploy our Sunday best, biggest power on the gradients where it matters. And that means holding back a bit of energy elsewhere and eating and drinking like a boss. He seems to be stoked, doesn't he?
Yeah. Don't know what's happening. Maybe somebody's running inside of him or something.
Up and ahead, Lee had spotted an inconveniently stranded van. That was hard, that. I really struggled.
Yeah, I'm really struggling today.
Those of you who have followed the channel, sometimes out of grim loyalty for many years, and that's hugely appreciated by the way, will know that chaos is my constant companion. And so it turned out, because at the bottom of the pass, as you saw in the intro, we nearly got front-ended by a descending cyclist, and now a new addition to Hardknott's armoury of cyclist deterrents. The Lake District rhythm. Hard, moderate, hard, oh my god, easy. I think it's fair to say, Lee, that it's been a little bit tougher than anticipated.
Emotional. We've got some good miles in the bank.
We do. And look at the reward. To the climbers, the Vista spoils, and maybe some chips and an alcohol-free beer at the end of this, I think. Yeah, I'm not needing sweet stuff, but look at that view, that is sweet. Bike Racing Without Mercy brings you premium post-ride nutrition, courtesy of the Bagacha diet. Look at this, we got all of the brown foods and brown drink. Look at that. Tell me that doesn't look incredible. And Lee's got a side order of fries to come to. And with 2.5 weeks to go until the Fred Whitton itself, and as you can see on the screen right now, I felt it was only appropriate to round off the training indoors with an FTP test, well, a Zwift's FTP test, but with a hard start for the 20-minute effort. As you can see on the screen now, the 5-minute VO2 max on the Wattbike Pro was 302 watts, and that's good indoor power for me. And then for the 20-minute test itself, I averaged about 303, 304 watts for the first 60 seconds, then settled in to an infernal threshold that built and built and built, and over the 20 minutes averaged 270. So that was an FTP of around 257. I reckon outdoors with the Favero Asiomas that read about 5 or 6 watts higher than the Wattbike Pro, plus it's easier to put down the power outdoors or with the Faveros compared to the air resistance of the Wattbike. I reckon my FTP will be around about 265 watts, and that's roughly the same as we tested indoors in the lab with Adam from Oxford University. Anyway, now time to get on with work Thursday, Friday, then flying off to Tenerife on Saturday to spend time with Lee, Paul and Paul in Tenerife for a little mini training camp ahead of the Fred to really hone the climbing legs. Onwards.